Hello, I'm going to give my own personal interpretation of a passage from chapter 18 in the Qur'an. Verse 84 in my edition, might be plus or minus a few verses in your edition. And I believe that this verse, these series of verses, describe the Buddha. In conventional Islamic thought, they do not recognize, at least in the little research I did, which was probably not adequate, it does not believe like they recognize the Buddha as being in the Qur'an. Now, it doesn't call it the Buddha, it calls it Dhul Qarnayn. But before I interpret these verses with my own interpretation, I want to explain the life of the Buddha so that the interpretation will seem more plausible. The conventional wisdom is that the Buddha was a prince. He was born to a king. The king had a kingdom, and some sort of prophet-like figure told the king if the Buddha ever saw suffering, he would leave the palace. And this greatly worried the king. So the king tried to shield the Buddha from suffering. But sooner or later the Buddha got out and was exploring the kingdom, and he saw suffering, and he left the palace just as prophesied. And he then became an ascetic and lived under a tree for 12 years where he became enlightened. And then after his enlightenment, he among other things, told people to practice the middle way. And that's just part of Buddha's story, obviously, but that's just a little background, but it's enough to follow this series of verses. So I'm going to read these series of verses, starting with verse 84 in my edition. And they asked thee about Dhul Qarnayn. Say, I will certainly recite to you something of his story. We established him in the earth and gave him a means to accomplish everything. So, if you're a prince and your father owns a whole kingdom, yeah, you can pretty much accomplish anything, right? Then he followed a certain way. So he's following the way of being, sort of living in this luxurious lifestyle of being a prince. Until when he reached the setting of the sun, he found it setting in a pool of murky water, and near it he found a people. We said, O Dhul Qarnayn, either punish them or treat them with kindness. He said, as for him who does wrong, he shall certainly punish him. Then shall he be brought back to his Lord, who will punish him with a dreadful punishment. But as for him who believes and acts righteously, he will have a good reward, and we shall speak of him easy words of our command. That says a lot in those few verses, but I'm basically thinking it is saying he found some people with he's living in this wealthy kingdom. People were doing questionable things with their wealth, and Buddha's just saying, look, if you do act righteously, you'll get a good reward, and if you don't, you'll get a punishment. But now that he's encountered this, it says in verse 90, then indeed he followed another way. So he's changing his course. Until when he reached the rising of the sun, so he's in a new land now, he found it rising on a people whom he had made no shelter against it. So I think this is where he's being an ascetic and living under the tree. He's not sheltering himself against nature. He's just going extreme. Thus indeed it was. Verily we encompassed with him our knowledge, all that was with him. So he's become enlightened now. Then he followed another way. So now he's going towards the middle way. And it says, until he reached the place between two mountains, so there are two extremes, and he found beneath them a people who could scarcely understand a word. Now, why are the people in the middle way, scarcely understanding a word? Now, I could just ask you for a second, how is your life going? Would you like more money in your life? Would you, if you could work an extra 10 hours a week and make a lot more money, would you do it? Or maybe your problem is that you're working too many hours and you'd actually need less money. Maybe if you made a little less money but had an extra 10 hours in your week, you'd be better. So they're the people causing disorder, and it says here, they said, O Dhul Qarnayn, verily Gog and Magog are creating disorder in the earth. Verily they shall pay tribute on condition that thou shalt set up a barrier between us and them. And this Gog and Magog, I believe, are symbolic of the problem of humanity in all its 5,000 years since civilization came. You have one extreme just living in luxury and doing questionable things with wealth. And the other people following another extreme of depriving themselves to the extreme, religious fanaticism, military fanaticism, all sorts of stuff. And these two tensions create disorder, and the people who are trying to find some balance get confused by everything, and it is very difficult to find your way out of. You can read the rest of the surah on your own, but I'm pretty sure this is Dhul Qarnayn in the Quran is the Buddha. Thank you. Bye.